Thanks, Brice. Welcome, everyone. So I just want to walk you really quickly through some of the conservative pieces. I'm obviously very involved in the solar side of things, and so that ties in here very nicely. So Brice has kind of given an overview of envelope of heating technologies and how they basically can be attractive to the developer from their bottom line, as well as a logical step in terms of meeting our climate commitments. One of the conservative pieces of this analysis has to do with incentives that are available that we haven't even talked about yet. So right now, NYSERDA actually has a program 2039, which is focused on encouraging just this type of commercial building in New York. It's focused on multifamily housing. It's currently about $2,000 per qualified dwelling unit. So if you remember a few slides back, Brice estimated that the additional cost for switching to a smarter building, whether it's ground source or air source, plus the kind of envelope improvements, was about $4,000 to $5,000 per unit. This NYSERDA incentive program covers about half of that off the bat. So $2,000 out of that $4,000 to $5,000 is available through this incentive if you wish to take advantage of it. To add icing on top of that is the solar piece. If you work solar into these buildings and actually make them a net energy building, then they raise that incentive to $4,000, $4,000 per dwelling unit. Again, the cost for the upgrades for the smarter building were $4,000 to $5,000, so this is 80+% of the additional cost. So if we could make a 12% return in 5 years without this, if we at least take advantage of the first one, or if we add solar into the mix, we can actually make a much, much higher return or reduce that rent premium and make it even more affordable and comparable to what people are paying now per month. So how does solar fit into this? Obviously, this is pretty sweet. I mean, if we can wash out that additional cost altogether, then that's kind of a no-brainer. Where are we at with solar? So I'm on the Trade Association for New York State for Solar. I do commercial solar development. I also have been the Solar Tompkins Program Director for 2014. Some of you will recognize this as Cornell's first 2-megawatt solar system up on Snyder Road. It's the first of 8 to 10 megawatts that they're planning to build through 2015, which is exciting. Just to put this in perspective, number one, for solar PV right now, so this makes clean electricity, there is typically no upfront cost, and you can often lock in a cost per kilowatt hour similar or less than what you're paying now. So back on this slide, why wouldn't I go after this $4,000 incentive if I can do solar for no additional cost, comparable to what I would purchase conventional utility electric from NYSEG? By doing this instead and then washing out my additional cost for the smarter building, that can be a really attractive proposition. So in terms of the multifamily example that Brice has kind of begun to walk us through, this is Cornell's 2-megawatt system. About a third of that would be what's required to do 100% of the Village Solar's heating. So if they were to switch that entire complex that they're planning over to air source or ground source heating, I think he modeled a mixture, it would be about a third of this system size. And this is not a huge system. I mean, to put it in perspective, Hugo Power Plant up on the lake, that's 300 plus megawatts. This is 2 megawatts.
Well, so you just referenced the amount of electricity to provide heating. Do you mean to run the pumps with the air or ground source?
Correct. So if we switched all of those new buildings under development to air source or ground source or a mixture of the two, it would be about a third of this system size. And if we wanted to do the entire building, so the baseload electricity, which is higher per multifamily unit than per home, plus the heating I just described, it would be about 3/4 of this system size. And the neat thing is a huge part of this can actually fit on the roofs of the Village Solars itself. So I think it was 1.5 times the amount that we needed for heating, so somewhere just over half. Of this system size can actually fit on the roofs of those buildings. And not all the roofs are perfect, but solar PV can work well on south-facing roofs, obviously, but also east and west-facing roofs as well. And so actually looking at their particular site, there's tremendous solar potential on-site as well as off-site. And just since we're here talking about commercial solar or non-residential solar, which can apply to multifamily, which can apply to actual commercial businesses, nonprofits, large institutions. I mean, we have institutions across this county actively doing or pursuing solar at the current time, right? We have Cornell, of course, with its 8 to 10 megawatts already developed and under development. We've got Ithaca College pursuing a system. We've got TC3's system coming online in the next month. We've got the city of Ithaca building a system out by the airport. We have dozens and dozens of other commercial businesses and nonprofits pursuing solar. New York is launching itself full throttle into large solar finally. And here are some of the ways that it's happening. So number one, for financing, as a developer, people are doing debt financing, right? So we're doing loans, that's nothing new. Banks are very excited to pursue solar. They're also excited to secure solar against itself, not just against the building or whatever that's being applied to. We also have things called like operating leases and power purchase agreements. So operating leases and power purchase agreements are two ways to deal with some of the incentives that come in for solar. So when I said a few minutes ago that you could do solar for no money down and often pay the same or less than you're paying now, your tenants could or your occupants could, that's obviously with a bunch of incentives coming in, and we can talk about why that is and what the value of renewables is and the avoided costs, the costs that they're avoiding. But all of that means that someone has to take those incentives. So with the debt financing, you as the developer can take those incentives if you can monetize them. But if you can't, there's lots of other attractive options like the operating lease and the power purchase agreement, where you as a developer or a builder don't have to monetize all that stuff yourself. Someone else who specializes in that can do that for you, but you can still provide your clients or your tenants with clean solar energy for about the price they're paying now. There's also something coming called community shared solar, which is we're going to be able to locate large solar facilities off-site, and homeowners, renters, businesses will be able to buy shares of those. And so if it is something that you don't want to get involved in at all, this is also something to be aware of that's coming, where you could just have your tenants also procure a share of solar and offset their electricity that way. And in that vein, there's lots of options for location. So as I mentioned with the Village Solar's multifamily example, we can fit a lot of solar PV on that roof. We could do it for a cost similar or less than what they're paying now. But we could also build this offsite. We could build it, on land that they own elsewhere, on land that they own somewhere else on that large tax parcel. We could also build this on land that a solar developer owns or someone else owns and leases to them. So there's a lot of flexibility, and all of this relates into the world of net metering and remote net metering and how people actually get credit for all this stuff. But you do get full credit. It is the retail rate, and it's getting to be a lot of flexibility, where things don't have to fit in this little box anymore. There's a lot of different options to make them more practical, easier to maintain, and also continuing to drive costs down. So the last piece here on other conservative parts beyond the tax credit, the incentive that I mentioned from NYSERDA and the way that solar can fit into that, is we have taken no credit here for the air conditioning. So ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps both provide air conditioning. That has a value to it. Those of you who own or operate multifamily situations know that, as well as commercial. We've taken no value for that cooling here. We've also only used the very base case low estimate for natural gas pricing. So Brice will talk a little bit later about what the different options for the forecast for natural gas pricing is going forward, but we've taken the most conservative, lowest estimate into account here. And then the third thing is, obviously we've done no monetization. You haven't yet heard any value being put on climate change, avoiding or mitigating climate change or reducing pollution or making our community more resilient. We haven't monetized those actual environmental or health costs at all. And so we're kind of treating this as we want to make the base case in today's economics, but this is a reality, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end.